Migrating to Australia, I'm Grant Williams. We're coming to you from the marvellous free city of Melbourne, and I'm joined to talk migration matters, issues, and meet fantastic people who have migrated to the great country of Australia by Australia's friendliest migration lawyer. Hello, Mr. David Bongiorno.
G'day, Grant. How are you, mate? We've got a lovely guest from South Africa to join us this week. Jaco Vorster is an external auditor and a senior partner at the Banks Group, one of this city's finest auditing and accounting firms. Jaco, welcome to Migrating to Australia podcast.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Grant. Thanks for having me on.
David, I'm surprised you didn't take the opportunity to opine about our freedom.
I thought it'd be good because, you know what? I still wore my mask from the car to the office. I've got my mask on indoors. So I think we've been broken, Grant. We're broken and do what we're told. There's no sense of spirit anymore.
I just think we've formed good habits, David. Look, you know me well enough to know that just because it's over,
it ain't over.
I'm not really sure that it's over.
That's right. That's exactly right. The double vax is very important for all of us to make sure that life can resume. Jaco, how long have you been in Australia for now?
I've been in Australia 13 years.
And you arrived from South Africa, or explain your journey to get to Australia so people know what you've been.
Long story short, went to the UK when I left school. I was there for 2.5 years. I met my now wife in London. We went back to South Africa where I had to study. We were there for 8 years. Both our boys were born in South Africa, but we decided to come to Australia when the boys were, I think, 1 and 3, so they can settle before they go to school.
So are they South African law? Does South African law allow dual citizenship? Are they dual citizens still, or are your boys Australian citizens and Australian citizens alone?
No, they deal. When they reach 18, they need to choose if they want to keep their South African. Otherwise, they need to apply. So with South Africa, if you become a citizen of another country, you need to actually apply to South Africa to keep your South African citizenship if you take on another country. Otherwise, you just lose it automatically.
Do you lose it and then revert to permanent resident, or do you lose it full stop and lose the right to reside in South Africa?
Yeah, so you lose your, you can only, if you don't apply, you can only be a citizen of one country.
Wow.
Jaco, do you know, are they discriminatory about the countries that they will accept for people who are dual citizens? Do you have an equal chance, do you think, if you are applying from Russia against applying from Australia?
I'm not sure about that. My wife actually stumbled across that on the South African Home Affairs website. I wasn't aware of that, and so before I applied for my Australian citizen, I actually applied to South Africa to keep dual citizenship.
And they said yes. They gave you a yes, yeah? You're a dual citizen?
Correct.
David, that highlights one of the things that we always talk about. Immigration is difficult. It doesn't matter which country you're talking about. And governments often don't publicise the little things that are not widely known. So Jaco wasn't talking about Australian migration there, but for someone looking to do any kind of migration issues in South Africa, they should look for David Bongiorno in Cape Town or Pretoria rather than just wing it.
It's really important because you don't want to fall foul of any country's migration laws. South Africa and Germany is another country where you need to seek. So I know that South Africa and Germany have the right to say yes or no. Jaco, with a lot of South Africans I've helped over the years, what they've done is basically we've helped them get their Australian citizenship, and then they said goodbye to their South African passport. Every country's passport has value. To what value and what purpose depends. But, I mean, you maintained your South African citizenship out of a sense of sentiment, or was it for a specific purpose? With an Australian passport, you arguably have greater travel power. Yep. So what made you become a dual citizen and not renounce your South African citizenship?
I don't know. It was just something inside me that I wanted to keep that part of who I am.
I think, David, we've talked about how I would be conflicted, I'm sure, if I had to adopt a different flag of convenience if we talk shipping terms. I just can't imagine. Yeah, I'm always impressed by anyone who can take the plunge. I can't imagine renouncing my Australian citizenship, but then again, I don't know how I would go if I'd committed to live in a different country and then not take on their citizenship, because it's really an expression of commitment. So do you ever feel conflicted? I mean, we joked before we pressed record about cricket and rugby. So do you ever feel conflicted in any way with the loyalty between Australia or the Rainbow Nation?
Look, we decided to come to Australia. I think my loyalty lies more with Australia. This is where we live. The kids are growing up here. This is our home now. So Australia is probably ahead when you're talking rugby. The Springboks. The Springboks is a different story.
They are a special team, as is the All Blacks. What is it about those two teams in particular that make them, much like the Brazilian first 11 in football, the English cricket 11, why are the Springboks, and from your opinion as a South African Australian, the All Blacks, why are they symbols of excellence in rugby as opposed to the Wallabies, who are very good too?
I think it's the number one sport, and to play for the Springboks is a huge deal. I suppose any national team is, but I think the Springboks and the attitude and they play hard. It's really, they don't take a step back. It's, and similar with the All Blacks.
I was going to say, though, the Springboks would be the only team in world rugby who are not scared by the haka.
No, they do challenge.
They're fantastic. And it's the same, I guess, in cricket, the same reasons.
Yes, yeah. Look, cricket, I think, going through a bit of issues at the moment with the politics behind it and the administration. But, yeah, I think the Springboks are still the biggest side in South Africa.
The world game. Socceroos? Is that your world game team? Or are you... What's the South African team called?
Bafana.
That's right.
Yeah, look, I'll support the Socceroos any day of the week.
Benny McCarthy was a great captain. Benny McCarthy's Bafana were a great side. Why isn't, I mean, this may be outside your area, but why isn't South Africa better at football than, it should be fabulous at football. It's perhaps yet to live up to its full talent.
I'm not sure. I don't follow the football as close as the rugby.
If you saw the size of Jaco, you'd know he's a rugby player, Grant. What are you now? What are you, 6'1", 6'2"?
10, 5'11".
You're bigger than I am, I can tell you that. Much taller.
I just had that feeling when I asked Jaco about the Socceroos. I was half expecting him to say, like most Australians, no, the Matildas. I think when it comes to the world game, we're all fans of the Matildas, but still,
oh yeah.
Can anyone name the captain of the Socceroos without looking it up?
And let's pop in that rabbit hole briefly. The difference is the girls play with spirit and they don't simulate. That's why they're better to watch. They've got more spirit than the boys. I love the Matildas. They're great. The Socceroos we won't talk about. Jaco, you did your commerce degree. It was an accounting degree or a commerce degree in South Africa?
Correct. Accounting, commerce, and also majoring in computer science.
Oh, in computer science as well. Okay.
So it was a dual major.
So did you do what lots of young New Zealanders, South Africans and Aussies do? So you did a working holiday to United Kingdom, did you?
Correct.
And did you work in IT or in accounting, auditing?
In London.
In London?
London was casual work. It was straight out of school. So I was doing basically casual bar, security, hospitality, construction work. And then went back to South Africa and only did my started studying when I was 21.
Ah, okay. And do you think as a mature age student, because you're 3 years in, did that make you a better student when you sat down and hit the book?
Yeah, I think so. It was by that stage I was married, and so it was a different road than your normal student that's out of school. And
yeah, because I went to law school, Grant, as you know, 27. And so I was there for a purpose, not to party. So I don't think I went to the on-campus bar once. The story with accounting and IT, what made you choose IT as opposed to accounting auditing? Or I'll start again. What made you take the double major and ultimately choose auditing?
I was always going to do an accounting commerce degree. When I looked at what they had to offer, one of the options was you could do an extra year, so do 4 years instead of 3, but choose another major. And I thought that would just open another couple of doors, keep opportunities open. After about 3 years of study, I started working full-time, moved my studies to part-time at night, and I started working in an accounting practice full-time. So started building up a bit of experience while finishing off my studies, which actually, doing the practical, assisted with the final years of study.
It's an interesting issue then. It's very hard to be married, partnered up, full-time work in night school. So I tip my hat to you for that. Coming to Australia, was it an arduous process or for you, or was it a smooth process?
It was actually quite smooth coming over on a partner visa. So my wife had applied for citizenship for the boys already in South Africa. I had my permanent residency organised, so that was fairly easy to come over.
David, does that make it easier when an Aussie who has married someone from offshore and they've lived in a third country, because that was the situation with the UK, does it make it easier for the partner's citizenship application if the children are already Australians?
It certainly would make the process to permanent residency a lot easier because there's so much evidence and such a strong Australian connection. I mean, if Jaco and his wife had not had children, he'd still get a smooth PR because his wife's Australian citizen, Australian permanent resident. So there's no issue there. But the more evidence you have to show ties to Australia or Australian ties, the better. It's nice to hear that you went through the process without any grand dramas, because no doubt you would have heard some horror stories of partner visas gone astray. Yeah, absolutely. And the main killer is lack of evidence. Jaco had great evidence, an Australian wife and 2 Australian...
We still had to jump through hoops and provide a fair bit of other information, but it all worked out.
Now, you did it yourself with your wife, correct? You didn't use an agent or a lawyer, did you? And how did you find the process? I mean, probably with your background, was it probably less challenging than it might be without someone without the technical mind of an auditor? How did you find the process doing?
It was a fair bit of work that had to go into it.
It's not something to be taken lightly, and you're absolutely right. What did you find the most the most challenging part of it? A lot of people have trouble when they write their statements because they don't know what to say or how to say it.
That was probably getting it in the right wording and getting it to look as good as possible is probably the most challenging.
Did they interview you?
Yes. Interesting. Not too bad. You keep to the truth and you say it as it is, and then you've got no issues to worry about.
Did they ask you anything that you didn't expect, Jaco?
To tell you honestly, I can't remember all of that, but yeah, I remember there were a few curly questions, but nothing too bad.
Did they do it on the telephone, or did they request you attend Pretoria to do it face to face? Oh, that's good. That's good. Not so difficult on the phone. These days with telephony, it's easy, but I can imagine a face-to-face would have been very challenging because you're on foreign soil and you've got a person who's got to ask questions and judge you by your answer and by your body language.
Yeah, that would be challenging.
Absolutely. I don't know how I'd go, Grant. How would you go? Face-to-face?
I don't know. I think I'd go better face than on the phone, I think.
The story is they can ambush, and I always tell clients that if they do a phone interview, be very careful about how you say things, where you say things. If they call it an inappropriate time, I always suggest, oh, sorry, yes, it is David, but I'm on my bike riding to X, or I'm in my car going to Y. Can we talk tomorrow? Because they rely on the element of surprise. Did they formally announce an interview time for you, or did they just ring and say, Jaco, it's Pretoria, we want to talk about your partner visa? Do you remember how they did it?
I think it was booked in.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Because sometimes it's not necessarily booked in.
The thing about a phone interview compared to face is that you miss all of the visual clues. So you need to be really clear about what you are saying and what you mean in a phone interview, don't you, David?
That's a very good point. And when they request clarification, that illustrates the point. It's a lot harder to provide answers without the benefit of body language and eye contact. But Jaco survived it, and Jaco's a citizen. And what's the best thing about being an Australian?
Being in Australia, it's a great country.
Actually, I want to explore that a little bit, Jaco, because you've lived in Britain and obviously South Africa and Australia, Commonwealth countries. We all have the Queen, and we wish Her Madge. It's been a very rough week for Her Madge. What are the main differences, Jaco, between South Africa, the UK, and Australia as just living day to day?
Australia is a lot safer. You don't have, that's the one thing in South Africa, I suppose. When you grow up in South Africa, there's always crime around, but you get used to that as the way of living, and you're constantly aware of your surroundings, what's happening around you, and you're just constantly looking at what's happening around you. Where in Australia, you can walk down the street and you don't have to worry, but you don't have to constantly be aware of what's around you. So it's definitely a lot safer. If you were driving down the street in South Africa, in a suburb in South Africa, and you're driving down the street in a suburb in Australia, if you didn't know which one you were, you'd think it would be either. The people are very similar. The housing is very similar. People enjoy their sports, their braai or barbecue, and their beers.
I love a beer.
So it's the people are very similar. London's a bit different.
How's it different? Because I've lived and worked in my old life as a journalist in London. How did you see it as different to, say, South Africa?
I thought people are not quite as friendly as your general Australian and South African people.
Fair call, man. It's a fair call. Who do you think they love more? The Poms love Aussies or South Africans or Kiwis more? Who do you think they love? Probably none of us. None of us.
I would say all of them.
Who's got the better animals, South Africa or Australia? Oh, the kangaroo and the koala lose out.
Yeah, you've got the big five.
Now, you work in a very long, well-established accounting auditing practice, and no doubt you know how everybody who is migrating considers at one time or another accounting or auditing if they've got the degree in the background, because it's a very popular way to migrate. It's a very difficult way to migrate now, almost impossible way to migrate. But what would you say to people who are on the ground, finishing their degrees at Monash, University of New South Wales? What would you say the key to getting a job in Australia is in the field of external auditing or accounting? What's the key? How do you distinguish yourself?
To get out of university into an accounting firm, if you can have some accounting standards knowledge and a good knowledge of maybe some tax laws, which they don't. Yes, they touch on that in university, but if you can go outside of that scope a little bit and broaden your knowledge of accounting standards, auditing standards, if you want to go into auditing, I suppose some skills in accounting packages, Xero, MyOb, and Excel.
What are the young graduates at your firm, what have they got, and what secrets, what tricks, tips can you pass on to listeners about not only having what you've had, but I mean, is it a matter... when I started in law a long time ago, it was 9 to 9, no life-work balance. It was 9 to 9 every day, 12-hour day. Are young graduates expected to work those type of hours these days?
No, not at our firm. We really try and encourage a work-life balance where, especially as a graduate, you're coming in out of university. Now all of a sudden you're working 5 days a week. You work your 8:30 to 5 or 9 to 5:30, but especially now during lockdown where you need to have that break cut off after work. You don't want to be working 12-hour days.
Yeah, I was very impressed that you were just talking about the accounting standards and you did not use the word framework once. Because when I was studying them, that word was rammed into our heads. It was all about the framework.
That's all accounting standards now.
Yeah. Have you got lots of family still in South Africa?
All my family's in South Africa.
Okay, so are you travelling back and forward frequently?
We've been back a few times. I haven't been back recently, but we are due to hopefully next year once borders start opening up. And yes,
Jaco opened the door. I wanted to go into the pandemic a little bit because
that was.
What else have we got to talk about this year, right? I'm just interested, Jaco. The reason I asked about your family was what was life like for South Africans during the lockdown? What kind of lockdowns did they have? Because, look, listeners know all about how it affected David and I. So
it smashed South Africa, didn't it? It smashed South Africa. It was
particularly
brutal.
Significant case numbers, significant deaths. Their lockdowns, I think they actually went into lockdown before us, and they had all bottle shops were closed, so you couldn't buy cigarettes, alcohol, which was, I think, maybe more hard for them than the actual lockdowns. But yeah, it was significant. But both my parents had COVID and they got through it. But it was, yes, we have family members, friends of family that have passed away from COVID, and yeah, it was pretty bad.
Yeah, we had a very inconvenient period, but I don't think anyone in Australia should forget just how bad
South
the
Africa,
rest of the world.
South Africa, the Philippines, Italy. Yeah, the rest of the world was smashed by it. Mum and Dad have made full recoveries?
Yes, yeah. They actually caught it after they had their first vaccine, so that was a lot less severe than it could have been.
It's extraordinary.
Oh,
Extraordinary.
boy.
Tell me one thing that comes to mind with your profession, and it's a really important quality to have in a profession, is professional skepticism. I mean, that's what you need as an external auditor, don't you?
Yeah, that's the key to being.
Explain to people listening who might be embarking on the path of external auditing what professional skepticism, how it manifests in your occupation.
Basically, it is to not take anything for granted that you look at. So if you're looking at a ledger, if you're looking at a set of financial statements, always question what's behind the figures, what's behind the transaction. Just always have that in the back of your mind when you're looking at a piece of audit evidence, a supporting document or a transaction, not take anything for granted.
If you can't prove it, it didn't happen, right?
That's right. And it's, just keep your mind open and have that questioning mind about what is this, does this relate to the business? Does this actually stack up?
So it's a quality that serves you well as an external auditor. Now, as an external auditor, you don't just audit law firms. Who else are the other businesses you audit?
We audit the law trust accounts, solicitor trust accounts, real estate trust accounts, accountant, not-for-profit organisations that are registered with ACNC, any companies that need to lodge with ASIC. So if you are foreign controlled, so therefore your parent entity is a company. Also, if you meet the criteria of being a large company. So, and then also if you're a public company, we also do small listed entities, and any companies that also need to, if you have finance requirements and the bank requires audited financial statements. But we do other assurance type work as well. So business valuations, due diligence. So if someone wants to either buy a business or buy into a business, we can do a due diligence on that business. But also we can do internal controls assessment. So you might not need an audit, but we can come into your business, have a look at your systems and controls, assess them, test what your controls are supposed to be doing and see whether they are actually working, and point out weaknesses and some practical improvements that you could do to strengthen your controls within your business.
So listening to you talk about the diversity, the depth and breadth of the work and the different bodies you deal with, the different organisations, you have to have very good interpersonal skills then.
Oh, yes. Yeah. You're dealing with clients all the time, and different types of clients, different industries. So it's a wide range of personality types that you need to deal with.
Do you think, and Grant, step in here, do you need to have a stronger business acumen as an auditor as opposed to an accountant, given the depth and breadth and diversity of the work, or is the business acumen needed to be in either occupation?
I think in both would be the same. Where as an accounting or tax partner or a tax accountant, you'd need to have that same sort of business knowledge, business acumen, because then you're advising them on a different side of the business where you would also be looking at future planning.
Yeah, I think, David, you know my thoughts about just so many accountants are equipped to pass the exams, but when it comes to advising businesses about business, you need to separate between process and then between the sort of marketing and growth sides of advice. And I think sometimes we're trying to turn people into all-rounders where they should be specialists. But then again, I don't do accounting anymore because I just didn't like it. I mean, Jaco, I pretty good at it, but it just didn't turn me on. But then again, I got frustrated because so many businesses might have gone 15 or 20 years without getting any really serious advice. They just think accountants are there to do tax returns, and you know.
So as an external auditor, you would have a prophylactic preventative function.
You're going to get us banned from YouTube saying things like that.
As soon as I said it, I thought, oh my God, Jaco, oh my God, Grant, I've said
straight away.
You have a preventative function and a curative function as well. Obviously, it'd be better to work in the preventative space. Do you work in the preventative space more, or the curative, solving problems or preventing?
We try and do both. So if we're auditing a client, we're a business, we would look at the supporting documents, we would look at the financial statements materially misstated. We would go through the audit process to be able to verify the numbers. But during our process, we would also look at the business, look at their systems and controls, and we would then provide a management letter, discuss with management ways that if we find something that they can do better to improve their processes, we would discuss that with them and help them implement those. And I suppose that's also what helps with such a variety of types of businesses that we audit. You can pick up areas that some businesses might be doing, and you can bring those across and make those suggestions to a client that might not be doing the same. So we try and do both. You want to be able to sign off on the financial statements, but then also provide some value add and improvements to the business for the future.
You'd be dealing with many different types of people, and when you're in the curative phase of repairing damage and minimising subsequent pain, you'd be dealing with a lot of very emotional people. So I'm guessing as an external auditor, it's not about being just cool and detached, but you'd also have to have a huge degree of empathy, I'd imagine.
Yes, but you deal with different levels of stress with clients, but if their business is doing well, then it's a lot easier to discuss those sort of things with management.
Jaco, having lived in the UK, South Africa, and now in Australia, advice as an accountant, and is it fair that I can call you a highly skilled business analyst?
I wouldn't say, maybe not a highly skilled business analyst.
You're used to looking at the systems and the processes that businesses use. What would you tell an English-speaking migrant who is essentially from a Commonwealth country about what they can expect to be significantly different if they want to be in business in Australia?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure, to be honest. What's significantly different in running a business or as an accountant?
Well, I'm thinking as operating a business. I mean, customers in Australia. I mean, do you think business is harder in... I know it's very hard because it's in general. There's all sorts of industry sectors and size of business or whatnot. But let's approach it from another angle. Do you reckon it's a good thing to think about uprooting from, say, the UK or South Africa and bring your business skills here and set up in business?
Yeah, definitely. I think the opportunities in Australia is a lot better than in South Africa. The UK is really well established, but I think Australia opportunities a lot better than South Africa. So I would definitely recommend that.
Jaco, what made you choose Australia over New
My
Zealand?
wife's Australian, so
That's good enough reason. That's a good enough reason. That's a good. Well, see, we can we can all live in New Zealand, and most New Zealanders come and live over here. I'm always curious because we had a guest who a Serbian Australian lawyer, a lovely person, very smart, warm person, and she gave Grant and I a few surprising insights into New Zealand that we weren't aware of. You remember that, Grant?
I do.
It was interesting. Yeah.
She had the most circuitous route to Australia.
She went Zimbabwe, New Zealand, Australia. Extraordinary. I mean, we have the big brother, little brother relationship with Australia and New Zealand. Is it the same with South Africa?
I don't think it's quite the same because you have so many neighbouring African countries to South Africa. So it's not quite the same.
Now, in terms of your senior audit partner at very established banks group, do you miss your IT? Do you wish you'd ever taken your IT further?
No, I suppose from when I was young, my grandfather was a chartered accountant. I think he was a partner at Deloitte's in South Africa, and I helped him out when I was after school. We'd go to their place. So it was always going to be accounting. The IT was maybe a side thing just to keep the opportunities open.
Now, how many children do you have?
Boys.
2 boys. Do you want your boys to follow in Dad's footsteps and be accountants, then external auditors?
The eldest has already decided that he wants to go in this direction. No pressure from me. So he's made that he wants to go into the accounting or actuary business. So
you raise a good question there. Can you, for listeners who don't know, can you, in the brief form, explain the differences between an accountant, an external auditor, and an...
So actuary is more on the sort of a risk side, where an accountant is more tax business services. So they not necessarily tax returns only. They would look after your business, planning for your business, and work with you on your business and the group and your structure to get the best outcomes, where an auditor would look at your financial statements of the business, and we would test those financial statements and basically approve or provide an opinion whether these financial statements can be relied on.
I come from a family of accountants, and that's why I'm not an accountant. I finished maths in fifth form. When I got 11% at the end of fifth form, they said, "Buongiorno, no maths for you." And I wish I had, because maths is numbers I'm scared of still. And it's something we mustn't be scared of. Do you think financial literacy is something that kids should be taught in this country?
Definitely. That's definitely something that, and from a young age, so you need to learn what the value of money is. When some kids leave school and they have no concept of money, and so that's definitely something that needs to be done.
I mean, you'd have it from a professional perspective, but also a concept of money from a professional perspective, but also from a migration perspective, because it's not cheap to migrate, is it?
No, not at all. That's a very expensive exercise.
And what was the most...
I just wanted to interject a controversial opinion, David. Why are we asking schools to teach financial literacy? What the hell are parents supposed to do?
It's a very good point. Very good point.
And I'm mad at Mr. Alexander and Sergey, his offsider, because it's not about machines that go bing. You know, risk and everything are things that people have to calculate all the time in business, in their choices they make for health and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, parents need to do that job. They need to be helping children understand about choices. Teachers have got more than enough to do than teach our kids how to drive and how to count. Counting in terms of setting up bank accounts and understanding mortgages and all that kind of stuff. What are parents doing? Don't people sit around and talk about that over dinner anymore? I'm sure that happened with you, David, and with you.
Oh, no? It did, but for me, it went in one ear and out the other. But Jaco, I mean, was that also, I mean, Grandpa was at Deloitte's. Did that sort of influence your choice of career? You know, you had an understanding and an appreciation of a dollar before you hit your teens or while you hit your teens, did that shape why you became an auditor as well? Because you understand the importance and value?
I think so. Yeah, like I mentioned, he would be sitting doing accounts, and I would come back from school and would sit and he'd explain to me what was going on in the accounts, and it was definitely broadened your mindset. I suppose also my parents helped open with finances and those sort of discussions. So, yeah, that helped.
What was the biggest surprise in terms of cost for migration? What hadn't you anticipated on?
Just, I suppose, one thing was actually the move and bringing everything across. Coming from South Africa with the currency exchange, a big cost was to actually get set up in Australia when you come over with not a lot of money, and to get yourself set up. And yeah, that's a fair cost.
Is it more expensive to live here than you expected, Jaco?
Not really. If you're earning an Australian salary, then it's probably less stressful to live in Australia than South Africa. If you earn an average salary, you might struggle to make ends meet. Where in Australia, if you earn your average Australian salary, you could live a comfortable life.
Did you see the news this week that the average house price in Hobart is now $1 million? Yeah.
Extraordinary. Your wife is from Melbourne originally, I'm assuming?
No, she's from Sydney, actually.
Oh, wow. Sydney's the glamorous international city of Australia. What made you choose?
So we were overseas. Kath's sister moved to Melbourne. She married a Melbourne boy. They had some kids, and so Kath's parents decided they'd retired, and they decided to move to Melbourne to be closer to the grandkids. So we decided to come to Melbourne as well. I think it was a good choice.
A good choice. We're not the world's most livable city at the moment. Do you think we will come back and be able to claim that title sooner or later?
Definitely, we'll get back there.
We're confident, aren't we? It was Australia's busiest city, I reckon, this morning, out there with all the mayhem in the shopping centres.
Oh, my goodness. The queues just to get into a shopping centre was crazy.
I don't know. I don't know. David, I just went out to get my coffee to support my favourite coffee shop. I could not believe that people had all decided to go and do the shopping centre shopping on the first day that it was possible. Nutso.
And the sum of money that will be injected into the economy as a consequence, I heard $500 million. I just didn't know what time period that would be between now and Christmas. Some insane number. The activities there we've been hoarding for so long.
But haven't we all just been spending our money on Amazon and whatnot? I don't think people have been hoarding.
I've never bought anything on Amazon. Jaco, tell me, if you had to do this all again, how would you do it better? How would you do it smarter, for want of a better term?
I would probably look at engaging in a lawyer to help with the immigration process, to help with the stress and of that process a lot better. That's probably the only thing that I would change in the migration process.
Now, there might be some young South African professionals listening and contemplate the United Kingdom, New Zealand or Australia. You've talked about the differences between each country. What would you say to get them over the line for Australia as opposed to New Zealand? Because New Zealand is very popular. I mean, you had an Australian wife, so lay down was there that you'd come here. What's the most rewarding aspect about being in Australia apart from, say, safety?
Oh, the opportunity. The opportunity in Australia and Melbourne is great. And I suppose not necessarily only accounting, in all fields, there's just so much more opportunity.
We have a little tradition on the Migrating to Australia podcast that Grant has the last say. Are you gearing up for the last question? It looks like a last question phase you've made.
Well, yeah, and I want to bring it back to a bit of fun because, counting, Jaco, are there any words, Australian words or sayings that you still don't understand?
No, I think I'm across most of them. I would hope so.
Were there any of our sort of jingoistic sayings or even our customs that surprised you before you landed here?
Oh, look, Australian rules was definitely a bit of a surprise. I suppose in South Africa you would get a half an hour highlights package of the week's games, and it was just It just looked like jumping on top of each other, running around, no positions. It just looked like absolute chaos.
Man, there's no positions. There's 18 positions.
How do you follow? Who do you follow?
But but when you don't know the game and you just see these people running around, it just looked like there could be no position on the field. But I suppose that's one thing that I had to pick up really quickly is learn the game of Aussie rules in Melbourne, because that's what everyone talks about. No one talks rugby; they talk Aussie rules.
Was it Grant the Ella brothers? They used to call it the famous Ella brothers in rugby.
The four Ella brothers, Mark and the other guys.
They called it aerial ping pong, and they were union or league players.
The Ellas were union players, and I think one or two of them had a crack at NRL. But Mark Ella was the captain of the Wallabies.
Called aerial ping pong. I like
for
that.
a time. But, Australian rules is the most spectacular game on the planet because you get to run in more than two directions. Nearly all the other games, you're just running either forward or back the other way. Whereas in Aussie rules, everybody's running in all directions all the time.
I think it's a tougher game, rugby. Would you agree? I think it's a harder game, tougher game. Rugby players are tougher.
It's definitely a hard game. Look, both games have got the different aspects to it.
Yeah, they're so different. You can't compare them. You can compare NRL or rugby league and rugby union because they're quite similar. And American football, they're quite similar.
But the overall
games,
physicality, I mean, I was too scared. I've got more of a rugby build than an Australian rules build as a kid. I was too scared to play rugby, to be honest. Too scared. It's a scary game.
It's a hard game to play.
I enjoyed rugby at school, but the main thing I found different was that in rugby, unless someone does an illegal king hit on you, you nearly always know when contact is coming. But Aussie rules is really different. You don't see all the contact that is coming, so you sometimes can't be prepared for it, and your body twists in different ways because of that. But I just think that it's a really unusual game, and thanks for the Aboriginals for inventing it, and for the settlers for changing it into what it is. So.
Jaco Vorster, you've been fantastic this afternoon. Thanks for stopping by.
Thanks, Greg.
Senior partner, Jaco Vorster. Thank you, man. Thank you very much. It's been great. Have a good weekend, mate.
Thanks a lot. Have a good one.
Thanks, Jaco.
If anyone wants to reach out, the fastest way is Twitter, at David Bongiorno, DAVID BONGIORNO, all one word. Instagram. Grant can give you my Instagram address.
And if you can't get enough of David's headshots, do check out Instagram at David_A_C_. Oh, actually, I've got that wrong, haven't I? No,
I think we've all got it wrong. Jaco, I got to Instagram very late, so David Bongiorno was taken. So
David_A_C_Bongiorno.
That's it.
Thanks, everyone. See you next time.